The archer is an archetype frequently present in video games. Skilled with a bow, the archer embodies precision, patience, composure, and sometimes authority and virtue. A popular figure in fiction, the archer archetype is as old as the history of archery itself. Archery is a millenary practice, with evidence of arrowheads made of bones and stones dating at least 60 to 70,000 years ago. Over time, bows and arrows became the favored ranged weapons for hunting and combat all over the world, mostly replacing the usage of spear throwers. As humanity learned to smelt and use different metals, the preferred material to make arrowheads changed over time. From stone to bronze to iron to steel, arrowheads became deadlier over the years. As the bow and arrow evolved, the training and deployment of archers became more important for military forces, with armies having hundreds of archers at their disposal. With the creation of composite bows, which were smaller than the traditional bows but could deliver similar amounts of energy, mounted archery became a more viable technique that was particularly popular in Asia. Over thousands of years, archery remained an important part of military forces across the world, and bows, arrows, and bowstrings were improved over time to achieve greater effectiveness. During medieval times, the crossbow was introduced and challenged the bow's dominance. Being more precise and having longer range, the main downside that crossbows had was their slower rate of fire. However, both the bow and the crossbow would quickly fade away as firearms became more common. More effective and not requiring as much training to be used, firearms rendered military archery obsolete. Archery, however, was revived as a sport and remained a viable hunting option for those who can shoot a bow. Due to the nature of archery, an archer character tends to have an overall controlled, patient, and calm demeanor, as they must be precise and not panic to be more effective with their bows. Precision is imperative as bows don't have a particularly high rate of fire, even if this is not necessarily always reflected in gameplay. The discipline of an archer is not only reflected in the act of taking a shot, but also in the practice required to master the bow and arrow. An archer is only as skilled as the hard work that they have put into their training. And in modern settings, where their enemies have access to firearms, it takes even more skill to be effective with bows. As
anybody can shoot a gun, a bow. Now, that takes skill.
Making them characters that prioritize tradition and hard work. Archers are versatile, with bows being capable of firing different types and quantities of arrows for different targets and needs. And they must adapt accordingly to the situations, taking proper positions and having a plan B ready, in case enemies get too close. Those who can mount up on horses can perform positional adjustments and maneuver around the enemies even faster. The usage of archery to hunt makes so fictional archers are often also hunters, with archers often being capable of tracking their enemies and having the perception required to find weak spots in their targets, much like a hunter tracks their prey in the wild and tries to go for the cleanest possible kill. Throughout history, people have come up with a lot of unique ways to use the bow and arrow. Some were more stylish than others, and their unique skills, especially those of acrobatic archery, heavily inspired fictional depictions of archers over the years. Fantasy settings in particular love the flashy archers with backflips, air shots, and falling into head-first dives full of the exaggerated swagger of an archer. The archer archetype can have many symbolic meanings. The one that is probably the most common is the representation of love and fertility. This connection often comes from the mythological figures of Eros, the Cupid, and Kamadeva. And I don't think that I really need to explain why gods of love and sex are associated with an arrow, right? Archery is also associated overall with the idea of the divine, with many cultures having different important gods that were archers, and use arrows as a symbol of prophecy and deliverance. In Greek mythology, Artemis was the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, nature, childbirth, care of children, and chastity, and she was one of the most venerated goddesses in ancient Greece. She was well known for using a bow and arrow. Her brother Apollo was the god of archery, music and dance, healing and diseases, and truth and prophecy. In Hinduism, Rama, one of the most popular avatars of Vishnu, wields a bow. In multiple cultures, the bow and arrow are considered symbols of divine power, with the arrow representing the connection between the spiritual and physical worlds, with some even considering that an arrow is guided by a divine will. Belomancy is a form of divination that involves marking arrows to represent each option, and making decisions based on what arrow flew the longest distance or was drawn from the quiver, a practice that was common among the Babylonians, the Greeks, and Scythians. The bow can also represent virtue and authority, with examples such as Odysseus being the only one capable of using his bow as a sign of his rightful authority, and Joseph from the Book of Genesis having his hand empowered by God himself to use his bow to protect his people and show that he was their rightful leader. The archer is an interesting archetype to use in a game, as while its roots are in a millenary practice that is simple at its core, it is extremely versatile and can be heavily modified to one developer's liking, while still remaining recognizable and attractive to players. The archer can be a very fun and engaging archetype for players to pick up for various reasons that reflect real archery in one way or another. In games with projectile fall-off on the arrows, it introduces a minigame of how to properly line up long shots that takes time and patience to learn. Their range, combined with their usual weaknesses up close, make it so spacing is an important skill to master. The time to draw the bow makes so there is a learning curve to mastering the timing between shots. The bow and arrow being a fairly silent weapon make it so playing as an archer can be a viable stealth option in games with stealth systems, so you can safely and quietly take out enemies from range. And so the stealth archer was born. Lastly, it is undeniable that video game archers are heavily influenced by the fictional archers of different media. Let's be real, we've all seen our fair share of Legolas cloning attempts in games like World of Warcraft. XX Legolas XX's, L3G0 LAS's, Legolas's, and so on. These fictional characters definitely played a role in the popularity and the evolution of the archetype. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.